All right, if you're watching this on the Diamondbacks feed, the Locked On Diamondbacks feed, my good friend Millard Thomas has left in all sorts of residue of my allergy attack that I've been having all week long. So thank you for watching Locked On Allergies. I have the good taste of cutting that out. The Mets were like almost a lock to be going to the postseason this year. Now, to be fair, I picked Atlanta to win the East. But do you remember how I did? I did with a coin toss because I thought it was that close between the Mets and the Atlanta Braves. And if by that close, I mean 15 games apart, more than 2 weeks of games separate Atlanta and the Mets right now. And over the weekend, the Mets dealt Eduardo Escobar to the Los Angeles Angels.
Yep.
And lo and behold, the Angels added a nice infield piece, but the Mets are selling.
Yeah, they might be selling. I don't know. I mean, Fogo Power, I don't know how much of a stalwart he was in that lineup. I don't know how much of a critical piece he was, but he could be potentially the first domino, the first precursor to a big trade deadline for the New York Mets as sellers, because we know they have one of the biggest payrolls in Major League Baseball. And so far this season, I mean, if you actually go ahead and look at the standings, it's actually incredible how far down they are in their own division. What are they right now? At the time of us recording this, they're 15 games back of the Atlanta Braves in the NL East. I think they're like 8.5 games back of a wild card behind teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates. So it's super bad for the New York Mets right now, but I don't know if Eduardo Escobar is the first domino to them selling. It could be a little foreshadowing there, but he's also just a guy that hasn't had that good of a year for them and is getting older as well.
Yeah, but still, I mean, look at it may just be a roster shuffle move. It's not like they traded Pete Alonso,
No.
but it is an interesting piece of optics that the first team to trade a veteran for young players are the Mets. I actually think it's kind of smart and I admire it. Because maybe it isn't going to happen this year. And so maybe the dumbest thing they could possibly do is act like it is. Now, there's Ryan Finkelstein and everyone at Locked On Mets have been posting is Buck Showalter on the hot seat? I don't think he should be. Buck Showalter didn't suddenly become dumb. The team isn't playing well. But I don't think you go from manager of the year 1 year to being fired the next unless you're Mike Schilt of the Cardinals. So I think that maybe it's smart. They've got in a couple of young pitchers. A lot of members of the front office of the Mets were involved with the Angels front office. Maybe they know something about these prospects. They're like, hey, we could use someone like him. Maybe there's not enough room for Eduardo Escobar. I don't know. But it is interesting that maybe the Mets should not do a full-on sell, but maybe they should stand pat. Maybe they should stand pat. Scherzer's going to be gone. Scherzer's contract ends. They're going to have some more money spent. Now, my cousin Dave, who is one of the biggest Met fans I've ever met in my life, asked me, straight on, will the Mets ever win with the Cohen money? And I think they will. But maybe it'll take a little bit of growing pains. He's throwing lots of money at it and everything, and it hasn't worked out so far. But at least it's changed the culture from the Mets being cheapskates who don't bring anyone in. They brought in people and it hasn't worked yet. But, if they had won one more game last year, they would have won the division. And maybe they would have been in a better position than playing the wild card series against San Diego. I digress.
Yeah,
but I think it would be smart for the Mets to stand pat instead of being major sellers or buyers.
Yeah, because my thing with the Mets is I love their philosophy and their ability to spend money. I just don't like the guys that they've spent money on the last couple of years. I think we've really overrated this lineup construction. I think their rotation was their strength last season, and they kind of retooled that this year, and it just hasn't been as strong, and it has been a big reason why they haven't been as good this year. When we look at the Scherzers and Verlander just not being able to perform at the level that we expected them, and then you look at the lineup with guys like Lindor and the Canas and the Escobars and the starting Martes, like I never thought the Mets had one of the most elite lineups in the National League. I always thought they were maybe fifth at best when you look at the Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, the Padres. I never thought the Mets were that tier one lineup when I compared it to those guys. So for this Mets team, I just think that maybe they do need to retool their roster a little bit. I always felt like they had players in their lineup that was a little overrated. I was never a huge Lindor guy. He's been not that great so far during his Mets career. I think Pete Alonso's a stud, but the rest of his lineup, like Nimmo got a huge contract extension this past season. He's been good, not great for them. The rest of the lineup has been kind of average. The rotation just hasn't been good enough. I think this Mets team, they shouldn't blow it up. I don't think they're at this point yet, but at the deadline, at the offseason, I wouldn't mind them retooling this roster a little bit. You keep some of your stalwarts, some of your foundational pieces like the Pete Alonsos of the world, the Sangas of the world, I still love, but the guys who are just underperforming and making a lot of money, maybe shuffle some of those guys out and bring some new pieces in.
Yeah, I think they may be right. But just at this point, it's just strange here because it's one of the reasons why when people talk about it's not fair that this team acquires all these big stars, you can't ever yell that because
Yeah.
you don't know how the stars are going to gel. You really don't. Well, look at the West is interesting. London's interesting. The Mets are interesting. And I forgot to tell you who got the trivia question right.
Okay.
The question was Willie Mays wore number 24 throughout his career with the Giants and the Mets, except when he came up from the minors. What number did he initially wear in the major leagues? Resta Unique is one of my followers. Amy Green is another one of my followers. A bunch of people actually got it right. But those were the first two who sent it my way. He wore number 14. He wore number 14 when he first came up. So that's that piece of trivia. Good job there. Here's today's another number one. When Reggie Jackson signed with the Yankees after playing a year with the Baltimore Orioles, Reggie wore number 9 when he was a star with the A's and his one season in Baltimore. But when he came to the Yankees, Greg Nettles would not surrender number 9. Eventually, Reggie adopted number 44 in honor of Henry Aaron. But briefly in spring training, and you can see it in some of the spring training films, Reggie wore a different number. When he realized he couldn't get number 9 and before he adopted 44, what number was Reggie Jackson assigned before number 44? This is super obscure. Let's see if you can get it. Some of my ones who always get these trivia questions right, send it to Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast, Instagram, or down here in the comment section of the YouTube page. Those are where you can find me, Miller Thomas. Where can they find you?
You can follow me on Twitter at CreatorTimes24 for my personal account. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. We're on all your streaming platforms, of course, and we're on YouTube, Locked On Diamondbacks on there as well.
All right. Well, talking about baseball from the western of the United States all the way to London and finding out whether we should have 30 minor league teams in Europe. I think they should. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. He's Miller Thomas. I'm your pal Sully. Let's fist pump for another week.